So we were doing this verse number 60th of the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter 18th of the Bhagavad Gita, Gudharthadeepika. So Bhagavan just sort of clarified that one of the ways in which you can continue to do your sadhana without having to take sarva karma sannyasa, you can continue to do your duties, but you have to firmly establish your mind and surrender all your actions and the results thereof at my feet. And once you think that I am the ultimate thing for you, is Paramashreya, the most desirable thing for you, you are protected. How are you protected? Because you yourself are saying that I'm almighty, and you know that. So by surrendering to me, you're because you are giving me the responsibility of both yoga and kshema to provide you what you need and to sustain what you have, which is necessary for your future sadhana, perseverance on the path of yoga. And you would be able to overcome all the hurdles of life if you remain steadfast in the sadhana. And please understand, if you don't do it because of your own ego and you think that I have a fairly good understanding of it, I do not need to listen to my friend who is behaving like a wise philosopher. If you get deluded again and you want to bring in your own little wisdom, you'll be stuck in your own little world. You will never be able to see the universe of truth, which is infinite, which is free of all limitations. Choice is yours. And if you do not follow the advice that I'm providing you, you are going to harm yourself. That is the worst thing that can happen to you. And therefore, if you do that sort of a decision, if you take the decision that yad ahankaram asritya now yosya iti manyase, and if you decide that no, I'm not going to fight, you stay firm on your own fear of the war, with a few moral calculations, which I've already explained to you are born out of your own faulty understanding and your delusion. You get stuck there, mithyaisa vyavasayaste, and this is a very false kind of a conclusion you are drawing. This is essentially a presumption, a prejudice, a wrong understanding. You're trying to presume as your wisdom, and then what happens? Prakritis tvam niyokshasi. It's your nature, your swabhava, your long-held prejudices, your sanskaras, your impressions, your habits, the tendencies of your mind. So the takeaway point here is that when we aren't able to stand up to the challenge of our discrimination, of our viveka, and we are fatigued, we're tired, we want to avoid to stand up to this, what actually happens is that we do not benefit in any manner other than getting swayed away by the force of nature. The nature here is your swabhava, not swarupa. Swarupata, all of us are, Suttva, Sattva, and we are Sachidananda Swarupa. That's all great. But the historical personality we have, the historical personality is born out of several births, generations and generations of practice of papa punya that we have. It's all there in the hard disk, and that's going to influence our behavior and the trigunatmika prakriti that we have. And Bhagavad Gita has already explained whether we act in any particular manner, whether we do meditation in any particular manner, even if you take sannyasa in any particular manner, there are three types. And there are three dispositions which are going to come into play, whether it is sattvika or rajasika or tamasika. That we have to keep that in mind, and Bhagavan therefore says that prakriti swam niyokshasi. Either you listen to your reason, your rational ability, your spiritual intuition, you listen to your heart, or you listen to your blind mind, which will keep gaslighting you, keep cheating you, keep pushing you. Where? Where it wants to take you. It doesn't have a mind. It's like a vehicle without a steering. And it will move according to the way it has been programmed, based on your previous tendencies. And it's jada. Manas is jada. It will take you anywhere. not always in your interest. It will, in fact, take you towards a ultimate destination, which is destruction, nothing else. Therefore, then he says, having said that, now Bhagavan is similarly immediately saying, one, that you are Prakriti Asrita. Then he's saying, plus, don't lose your faith. Do you know one thing? I'm Antaryami. I'm all pervading, and I'm in all of you. You're guided by your Prakriti, but you have a higher option. And the higher option is the realization of the truth that the divine is very much present in all of us. That option, which is a harder option, which is difficult to appreciate, is always with us. So in the verse number 60, as he says, he continues to explain that how sort of Prakriti will pull you away. Swabhavajena kaunteya nibaddha svena karmana. You are sort of bounded by your habitual tendencies, your karmas, depending on what kind of social station you're born with, whatever tendency you are born with. Kartum nechasi yana mohat, whatever you are not wanting to do because of your ignorance. You don't want to do your duty. I don't want to do it. Then he's saying, Karishyasi avasopi tat, without having the power to decide, you will be like a machine. You'll be pulled into performing the thing you're opposed to. Why? You're a Kshatriya. Your tendency, you're egoistic. You have a sense of pride and honor. So when you would be on your path to sannyasa, you'd be trying to go away. Suddenly, what will happen is that something will pull you back, and there's no escape from it. You'll come and join, but you'll join at a position of disadvantage because the war would have started. You may have lost few of your great fighters. You may not be able to execute a certain plan because you will haphazardly jumping into the battle where the risks of loss are much higher. Then you get into the battle of life with a certain plan. Now, if you look at this whole war as a metaphor for our lives, those of us who think that let life flow and I'll see what can be done, we are likely to lose. Those who have some resolution and connectivity with the divine, and we work on it, we have greater chances of meaningfully moving towards our destination that we have set for ourselves in this life. I want to achieve this. And ultimately, all this sadhana, all these movements will lead us towards greater self realization and finally the absolute sakshatkara of the absolute, which will be liberating. If it's not in this life, it could be in some other life. But then the journey will be on the right track. So, having mentioned about this Prakriti, Swabhavajena, Purvokta Kshetriya Swabhavajene. So, you have this Kshetriya Swabhava. Tena, Soryadina, because you have Sorya, Virya, these are the qualities you have. You are a Shura, you are a brave person, gallantry and bravery, right? And a bit of arrogance, a bit of abhimana, ego, all that you have. Swena anagatunkena. So there is agantuka and anagantuka. So what happens is that, let's imagine, there is a certain pressure and then you refer to it, okay? Somebody is shouting for help, you go and help. But sometimes you may not be pushed into doing something, but it's your own internal prakriti, your own predisposition mood, your personality, your character would lead you to respond to a situation in a certain way. And that is not agantuka. That is no agantuka, it's anagantuka. So, what he's saying is, Soryadina Swena anagantukena karmana nibaddho. So, you are bound up by that karma. Karma here is your papa punya, everything. Basikritaha tvam. So, you are overpowered by your own previous. All of us are like that. All of us have an asset and liability account in terms of papa punya. And that overrides over whatever we fancy we can do. That will set certain obvious upper and lower limits. The punya will set certain lower limits. You cannot do papa even if you want. At a particular point, it will prevent it. Purva papa will set a higher limit. Even though you fancy you want to go to the top, it will create certain obstacles. So these previous karmas, nibbadho vasikritaha tvam, he kaunteya. I mean, you're my relative. I'm not lying to you. This is the truth. Yad bandhu vadhadi nimitam yuddham mohat swatantro aham yatha ichhasi. You're saying, I don't want to fight with my friends and relatives. And you think you're independent. You do not realize you're guided by your swabhava. But you have an option to surrender to me. That will mention later on. By saying, naturally, whosoever doesn't want to turn to the divine, what does he turn to? He turns to his own lower nature and is guided by his lower nature. The choice is that we can also make the higher nature a friend of ours. And that's up to us. That also lastly depends on Purva Punya, because all of us get certain shocks in life and certain depressing moments in life, but all of us do not turn spiritual. A lot of people go on repeating the same mistakes. So Bhagavan, what does he say here? Swatantra aham, I'm independent. I have decided, this is my judgment. If you think like that, jatha ichchasi, tatha sampadayishyami. The moment jatha ichchami, the way I desire, I shall do it. I shall complete that particular thing, accomplish that thing. Sampadayishyami iti brahma kartum. So this brahma, because of your faulty understanding. This is not true. You think you are independent. You are not. Na ichchasi, you don't want to fight this war because of this faulty understanding. Tat avasopi. Of course you will do it. Avasopi. Because you don't have control over that. Because the prakriti and the game of prakriti will kick in and exercise its overriding powers over you. Anichanapi, even if you may not want it. Swabhavika karma paratantraha. Because you are dependent on your own karmas. You are paratantra, not swatantra. Parameshwara paratantrasya karishyasi eva. And then what he's saying is that you will do it. There is absolutely, you are dependent on your nature and you also dependent on the Almighty. So you shall obviously do it, but you have a choice. Why don't you focus on the divine principle much more? You may have a higher possibility that he mentioned there. Swabhavadhina dhinatam uktva ishvara dhinatam vibhrunoti. So he first mentioned that all of us are guided by our lower nature, swabhava. Whatever materially at this particular moment of life, we have a certain tendencies. Like, for example, somebody likes tea or coffee. Somebody may be a little interested, say, for example, in reading certain kinds of books, certain kind of dresses, certain kind of food. These are all swabhavika. Swabhavika is what is, I mean, naturally sort of evolved in us. Once we culture it, we do clarification, purification, then we work on it. We chisel that piece of stone. Then it becomes a beautiful, well sculpted statue. Similarly, what is naturally available has a lot of rough edges, may not be adequate, may not be sufficient, may not be useful for lifting this whole system, for achieving the higher goal of life, which is self realization, attaining that fulfillment, contentment. Therefore, Bhagavan is now twisting the story. He's telling all of you have this limitation, but all of you also have a great possibility. Why? I'm providing everything, including you. Why don't you look at that? So in the next verse, he's saying, Ishwaraha sarva bhutanam hridde sirjuna tishtati brahmayana sarva bhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. Ishwaraha sarva bhutanam hridde se he Arjuna tishtati. Now, Ishvara here is what? Maya Upahita Chaitanya. You know, in that Saundara Lahari, it says that, O mother, I worship thee, I follow the fate of thee, because this Shiva, this Ishvara, who has created this whole prapancha, this samsara, has done it with your help. The creator of this whole universe, who is Yantra Arudha, is making everything move with his wish. cannot even move one small inch, cannot even vibrate without your help. How can Shankaracharya write the same thing there? He's saying because Ishvara is Ishvara because it's Maya Uparita. Without the power of Maya, he's completely powerless. That power is the power of Maya, which he assumes. And Ishvara and Maya are not separable. Sakti and Saktiman, Shiva and Shakti, inseparable. They're always together. You cannot say there is Maya here and there is Prakriti, no. So the Saktas, and Shankaracharya himself in Saundara Lahari sort of gives an impression that ultimately in the commentaries they write that God is the creator, but who is the actual Nimitta Karana? Is it Brahman? He doesn't create anything. He's Nirvikara. He can't even move an inch. Why? Where would he move? He's Achala, Achaloyam Sanatana, because he's everywhere. Now, once you introduce this principle of Maya, then he sort of can take any form. He can become particular. Earlier, he was just a nameless, formless universal. Then he can assume different particular forms. And to assume so many millions of forms, he first assumes the form of Ishvara, who with his Sankalpa Sakti, just with a wish, you can create this whole prapancha. It's a beautiful idea. And then he's saying this Ishvara is there in all of us. Brahman is also there. But he's Niskriya, Nirakara. He doesn't have any game to play. He doesn't do anything. But Ishvara can give us blessings, can protect us. Brahman, no, it's just the foundation. It doesn't mean anything. It's not concerned at all. Once it has this association with Maya, when we understand that relationship, then only other things become possible to understand. So when we are in sadhana dasa, we need to constantly understand the Sakti aspect of the Shiva. Both these things are very critical to understanding this. And I'm mentioning this because we are just going through the Navaratras, the Vasanta Navaratras. Ishwaraha Sarva Bhutanam, all, whether it's animals or birds or plants or humans, Hrid they say in their heart, not the biological heart. It's they pervade in the innermost sanctum, everywhere, that is in the mind, in the consciousness. Arjuna Tishtati, it is very much present. And then what? Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani, and he's the one who is sort of making all these animals and birds and plants assume different forms, commit different things, and come up with different gunas. He is the one who is the sort of the regulator of everything. He's the Sarva Niyamaka, Antaryami. In the Antaryami Brahmana, there is a discussion on it. So Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. And this, so Bhutani Yantra Rudhani. All these, all of us are like small machines, okay? Like small machines. And these machines are being sort of moved by an unseen presence, which is the God principle, which is the divine principle, which is God. And then that sort of is moving all of us. It's like if you have seen those doll shows as children, there would be a guy at the top and there'll be just invisible black threads or some wires, maybe plastic wires or something, where they are sort of tied to these dolls have hands and legs and stuff like that. He's sitting at the top, and there'll be swords, and there'll be 2-3 guys to pull them, and these dolls are talking to each other. Lovely shows. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen that anywhere, but these doll shows were there in India in the 70s and 80s. I haven't heard of it later than that. But there was so great attraction when these doll shows will come to the small towns, or sometimes they will sometimes go to small villages like circus parties. These days we also don't hear much about the circus parties. Now he's saying as if it's all controlled by one remote uh, control point. Everything is regulated from there. He's explaining beautifully all this. Ishwaraha Ishana Siro Narayana. He's controller, Isitara. He's Ishvara, he controls, he wishes. All of us happen to behave the way he wants us. And there is a beautiful, because this is kind of giving a picture of fatalism and the problem with spirituality, need for freedom, and what to do, what should be the sadhana krama when we accept this view that God is doing everything. And this is a very powerful question a lot of sadhakas ask. So what should we do when God is deciding everything? That will be answered exactly in the next verse. Okay, so this is a very important verse. What does it say? Yaha prithibhyam tishtan prithibhya antaro yang prithvi na veda is there inside Prithvi also. But Prithvi doesn't know that whatever is happening on it, I am not the one who is holding this whole samsara and these trees and plants and rivers and mountains. There's someone who is making all these things happen, but the Prithvi doesn't know that. Yasya Prithvi Sariram, and this is the body of that Narayana Purusha, the Ishvara. Yaha Prithivim Antoro Yamayati. It hides in this Prithvi. This whole Bhuta, Loka, is hiding there. And Yamayati, he's controlling everything. But the Prithvi doesn't know it. The humans don't know it. The birds don't know it. The animals don't know it. The plants, the rivers, the mountains, no one knows that they are sort of controlled by this particular source, which is guiding them, which is all pervading. Okay? And then he's quoting from other sources, Madhusudana Saraswati, Yatcha kinchit jagat sarvam drishyate shriyate piva. Whatever we hear about or whatever we see is sansara, is jagat. Whatever we see is jagat. Antar vahishyata sarvam, inside and outside. We see a lot of things even in our thoughts, in our dreams. Whether it is inside or outside, whatever we see, tas sarvam vyapya narayana stitaha. All this is pervaded by Lord Narayana. Vishu Praveshana is Sarva Vyapya, Sarva Vyapaka. Vyapya, tas Sarva Vyapya Narayana stitaha. So having pervaded all this, Lord Narayana, he's the all-pervading entity in all of this. Ityadi Sruti Siddha Sarva Bhutanam Sarvesham Praninam Hriddise means Antakarane. That is mind. So in this Shruti Vakyas, Upanishad sentences, statements, Sarva Bhutanam Sarvesham Praninam. Bhuta here would be both humans and animals, the birds and all kinds of the whole animal kingdom. Hriddese means Antakarane, in the mind, Tishtati. Sarva Vyapokopi, even though it's all pervading, it's everywhere, it's also there in the soil and water and the sky and the rivers and sun and moon. Tatra avivajyate, it becomes avivyakta, it manifests. Sapta Deepadhipatiriva Rama Uttara Kosalayam. Now Rama is Purushottama. He's Lord of the universe, isn't it? He controls this whole samsara. Here the indirect reference is to Lord Krishna. He's the Lord of the universe. But he is sort of born in a certain dynasty of the Yadavas and is a cousin of Arjuna. And he has already mentioned that. This is a completely mysterious thing that people do not understand, and they see me as a human being. And they're destined to suffer because they do not understand who am I. They don't care for what I say. So, Adhipati Riva Rama Uttara Kosalayam. Kosala is some part of Uttar Pradesh, and they say that this Uttara Kosala, he is the king of Kosala. He Arjuna, he Shukla Suddhanta Karanaha. Arjuna, Arjava, straight, Sarala. He's not a complicated guy, very straightforward. That's why he picks up Arjuna as his devotee, as his student. Because a student to be able to learn, if it is complicated, I'm sorry, the game is lost. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, Chalaki se kuch nahi milta hai. If somebody who becomes a little cunning with the whole process of learning, then the learning gets affected. And that Arjuna wasn't like this. So Krishna chose Arjuna instead of Yudhishthira or anyone else. There were many other people. He chooses him because he's that Arjuna, very straight. Shukla, Suddhantagara. No complication. Mother says, divide this gift. And he says, okay, I'm ready to ensure that Draupadi marries all the brothers. All the brothers could have refused, isn't it? Even if ritually they were married, they could have stayed off. He's saying, I'm sorry, this is not acceptable to us. At least the elder brothers, because the younger brother's wife is like your daughter, or daughter-in-law. But they all were readily happy to accept. You know, I mean, and this particular thing, to my mind, shows Bhima and Yudhishthira in a poor light. I'm sorry, this is Purana. There's no final conclusion to anything, but it shows Arjuna is morally superior to all of them. Okay, and then Yudhishthira will get the kingdom, but he's fighting, or he's ready to fight, and so everywhere, and then he got all the gold and gave it away for the distribution among the poor, and he's very powerful. He sustained a battle with even Lord Shiva, so he had all the qualities, but he was not arrogant, and he surrendered to the Lord Krishna. Please advise me. I want to follow your advice and accordingly take up my decision, and that's what Bhagavan is saying here. He Arjuna, he Shukla, Suddha Antakarana, Etadrisham Ishwaram Tvam Jnatum Yogya Asiti Dyutyate. So by saying, hey Arjuna, he's saying, please understand, because I think you deserve to understand, you have the capacity to understand. That is what Bhagavan is trying to indicate. That's what Madhusudana Saraswati says. This address, hey Arjuna, is symbolizing that Bhagavan recognizes the potential, the capacity in his student to understand a very mysterious truth about his all-pervading nature. So all of us think we are doing, but actually we're just instruments in the hands of the Almighty. King Kurban Tishtati, kya karke wahan pe he's there, Lord of the universe. King Kurban Tishtati, Brahmayan Itastataha. He moves us here and there, from happiness to sadness, from sadness to back to happiness. Brahman Itastataha Chalayan Sarva Bhutani. All the pranis, animals, birds, humans, whatever, moves us from here to there. As per our own karmas. And he has explained that he is not friend of anyone, he is not enemy of anyone. He signs the files based on whatever we have done. Varatantrani, because all of us are dependent on this. Mayaya Chadamana. What is this Maya? Because he is there in us in disguise. We never see Lord Krishna. He's all the time present, but we don't recognize him. Yantra Rudhani Iba, as if he's sitting, we are like machines, and he's riding us in disguise. We don't even recognize. Sutra Sancharadi Yantram Arudhani Daru Nirmita Purushadini Atyanta Paratantrani. Like, for example, these wooden dolls, and the doll shows, they will have this, the magician will have these thin threads with which he's pulling things, but we don't see it. And this appears as great magic. It happens as these things are happening on their own. But no, nothing is happening on their own. He's doing everything. We cannot see that. That's why it's called magic. So Daru Nirmita Purushadini. So all these dolls made of wood, Daru, and they are moving because they're Jada, they're material things. They don't have consciousness. How can they move? A wooden Hanuman comes and talks to wooden Sita. No, wooden Sita and Hanuman do not have life, don't have power. Somebody is making them act like that. These are dolls. Atyanta Paratantrani, because Jada. So all these Bhuta Varga, they are all Jada, Anatma only. But because of God's grace, they appear as if they are all having consciousness, and we seem to be doing a lot of things. Sadmana, Jatha Mayavi Brahmayati, the way the magician does it. Tadvat Ityartha Shesaha. This is how he's explaining this. This is how God is there. Now the question is a beautiful question which a lot of students ask any teacher. I have also asked this question. These questions have always emerged in the minds of all students at a certain level of sadhana. Ishwaraha sarva bhutani paratantrani prerayati. Now God is moving all of us to act in a certain way, to behave in a certain way. If you are saying that, then I tell you what's the implication. Chet, if you say so, praptam vidhi pratiseda sastrasya sarvasya purushakarasya cha anarthakyam. Do you know, sir, what you're saying? You are guiding all of us. You are in all of us. We are instruments in your hands. So, What is the need for these Upanishads? Why is there you have so much of moral science, Niti Shastras, Dharma Shastras? What is the point? You yourself are saying that you are hiding in all of us, you are moving us as if we are dolls in your hands. So the Shastra Anarthakya Prasanga, the question comes in. What is the need for reading all that? At the end of the day, how can we do any sadhana when you are doing everything you said that? First, you are saying there is Prakriti, and even if we ignore Prakriti, you are far more powerful. You are there in all of us. And Maya, this Prakriti is guided by you. The secret is not being understood. First, he said, you are a slave of Prakriti. Then he's saying, I am controlling everything. Actually, he's just twisting it. That Prakriti cannot even work on its own because it's not Sankhya, it's Vedanta. This Prakriti is Ishvara, this Brahma Ashrita. Maya is Brahma Ashrita. And Ishvara and Maya, this Maya and Brahma together, they become Ishvara. And this Maya is not separate from Ishvara. But remember this, the Maya doesn't have any independent existence. So the Prakriti is moving you, and I'm the foundation of that Prakriti. So end of the day, I'm doing everything with the help of Maya. He's just repeating the same thing by bringing in the Paramarthika thing, that Maya is playing with our lives, not without the knowledge of Ishvara. It's all approved by Ishvara because the Prakriti could actually move us and get us to do things without the knowledge of Ishvara, then Prakriti will become Swatantra, become independent. Then Ishwarasya Ishwaratya Hani Bhavati. Ishwar ke Ishwaratva Hani Prapto Hoega. Why? Because you have Prakriti doing things. Then he cannot be Ishwara. So whatever Prakriti is doing, Bhagavan said, is now clarifying, and this is very important point. It's actually me doing everything because this Prakriti cannot be independent of me. And I also cannot do anything without the help of this Prakriti. Because without this Prakriti, in the Paramarthika state, I'm Sachidananda Swarupa, I'm Nirvikara, Niskriya, Achala. So no games. You don't exist, I don't exist. What exists? That exists, that pure consciousness. Having said that, now he's addressing a doubt in our minds, poor, gullible, half educated, not so mature. We have picked up a few ideas, and therefore Bhagavan is very compassionate. And is asking a question on behalf of us and answering that. The question is, what is the point of sadhana? What is the point of purushartha? What is the point of shastra? And all that, end of the day, where Bhagavan himself is saying we're instruments in his hands. And he plays us around with the help of Maya. Then what is our future? This is determinism. There's a debate between free will and determinism. Now he's explaining. He's answering it beautiful. Now, if you are saying this, yeah, that's true, then Bhagavan says what? Tameva saranam gaccha sarvabhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapsyasi satsatam is beautiful. So you're saying I'm almighty, you have understood it, you have accepted it, but you don't have to turn a fatalist. In fact, that could be a condition for your freedom. How? He's saying this. Tameva saranam. You know Ishvara is moving you around? Yeah, why don't you surrender to God then? Why are you in a wrong way, in a limited way, presuming your independence and then cribbing about the fact that you do not have freedom of choice? You have a choice. You have a choice, and the choice is you are being dropped in the ocean. You have one choice, and that's the only choice. What? Try to swim. You might get drowned, but at least give it a try. Most likely you start swimming. If children are dropped in water, they start swimming. Now, if you know the all omniscient, omnipresent, and all powerful, omnipotent Lord of the universe is within us, moving us around, when you know this whole powerful secret, why don't you now turn to this truth and surrender to me? Tameva saranam gaccha, tam ishwaram saranam gaccha. And this Ishvara is not separate from Maya. So Shiva Shakti both. Why don't you surrender them? Sarva Bhavena Bharata. And he will explain each one thing. This Ishvara is not a particular thing. It's Sarvatmaka, Sarvavyapi, Sarvam Phalvidam Brahma, Sarvam Vasudevamiti. Iti Buddhya, with that sort of an understanding, then you are not chasing a limited goalpost. You are opening up your consciousness to new vistas, to new possibilities. And you gradually, with my grace, which actually is a product of your own prayer, so I'm not violating the principle of karma at all. But there is a tiny scope of freedom of choice. There's a beautiful statement by Francis Bacon, I think, if I'm correctly remembering. He makes a statement that by obeying laws of nature, we overcome laws of nature. Now we know gravitation is there. We cannot nullify it, but there is something called buoyancy. And air is fluid. And then what? And the aeroplanes were invented. They did not challenge the principle of gravity, but they made use of the principle of buoyancy. And then you have what? Aeronautics. This is not violating anything. The rocket technology that we had. And the Earth has gravitational field. It pulls things down. And then we invented things by understanding how to cheat this whole thing, how to get out of it without violating the laws. So we have freedom by surrendering to the ultimate reality, the God, the Almighty, the Divinity, Purushottama, whichever words we use is fine. So far, our intent is correct and we are on the right path. So Bhagavan says what? He says, Tam eva Ishwaram Saranam Asrayam. You take refuge in him. Saranagati Bhava, as Ramanuja always emphasizes. Sansara Samudra Uttaranartham. Why should you do it? This Bhavasagara, the ocean of darkness and conflict, apparent happiness, loads of delusions, frustrations, endless pain, endless uncertainty, if not pain. You want to overcome this. You want to swim through it. Then, Gacha Asraya Sarva Bhavena. Please go to him. Surrender to him or her, depending on how you look at it. Sarva Bhavena Sarvatmana Manasa Vacha Karmanacha. Sarva Bhavena. Ishvara is everywhere. And how do you propitiate? Sarva Bhavena. It's not only you're doing 5 minutes of prayer in the morning or 5 minutes of meditation while going to bed, but Kayana Manasa Vacha. Through your physical activities, through your words, and through your thoughts. So it's a very integral approach. Constantly being aware of God and guiding everything we are doing towards a greater communion with the ultimate truth, with the divine. That is what is being conveyed here. Cha he Bharata tad prasadat tasya eva ishwarasya anugrahat. Tat prasadat. Tat is what? Ishvara. Unke hi daya se. As a result of his grace, his compassion, the divine grace, anugrahat. What happens? Tattva jnana utpatti paryantad param shanti. Now you will have this tattva jnana, immerse in you, appear in you. Yesterday I was talking to a monk. Yeah, apparently he was studying in JNU. He was a student of Delhi University. He has become an Osho follower. He's become a monk. And he said something which was very interesting. He said that, I have not read too much. I read a little, but I found that when you meditate on whatever you are reading, whatever you're doing, your mind immediately makes sense of whatever you're observing. And then when you try to explain, it comes out much more spontaneously and fluently. Then it sort of appears as if you're saying something new because you have already internalized the whole thing. And you're saying that this has kind of helped him a lot. Very interesting. And that's actually true. That is what we call nididhyasana, contemplation. Manana, after you do sravana. Sravana includes reading and making sense of the sentences and the statements. And it's all there. The manana sort of is cooking it, baking it, chiseling it, and then the final product. It's inside out. First it's outside in, then it becomes inside out. And then it becomes very personal. The same truth. First is a universal truth, but then it becomes a personal. And then when you communicate it, it touches other people's lives. Again, it returns to that universal state. And again, when others are sort of listening to it, and again it becomes parokya. It's a very general statement. Then they leave it, and then again becomes their personal truth. It gains more power when it becomes personal. Then they give it to somebody. That's how paramparas are born and they're sustained. So he's saying Jnanat Pati Paryantat Param Shantim, even beyond that. Sakarya Avidya Nivritim. So avidya is the ignorance. And what is the karya of avidya? The self sansara, born out of ignorance. So sakarya avidya means ignorance is removed, and the product of this ignorance, which is sansara and suffering, sukha dukkha, the product, the cause and effect, both are removed. The cause is ignorance, and the consequence and the phala of that is dukkha, sukha, everything that the delusional life we pass through. Both are removed. Karya, karana, both. Sthanam advitiya prakasha paramananda rupena avasthanam shashvatam nityam prapsyasi. What kind of shanti you're going to get? Sleep? Deep sleep? Or you're sitting in an AC room watching a film? No, not that sort of shanti. It's Sashvata. It's Nitya. There's no return from there. Why? Because all your ignorance is removed. Vidyate Hridaya Granthis. The knot is unraveled, resolved, removed. Ignorance is mitigated. The consequence is also removed. Once you remove the cause, the symptoms of the disease, you deal with the cause, then effects are gone. Symptoms also go away. That's what is mentioned here. Sarva Gitartham Upasangharan Aha. So then finally Bhagavan sort of concludes in the verse number 63. And what does he say there? Iti te jnanam akhyatam guhyat guhyataram maya bimrishya bimushitat aseshena jathetchasi tatha kuru. But he's not imposing anything on the student because he is a very trained, he's one of the greatest acharyas, Yogeshwara. What does he say? Iti te tubhyam, to you, jnanam akhyatam, I have told this to you now. This is right before you, through the 18 chapters. And what is it? Guhyat guhyataram. I have told you about karma sannyasa, karma yoga, buddhi yoga, how to do bhakti, how to do meditation, how to do pranayama, and how to do karmas in a sattvic way. All that you have heard. But the ultimate thing is the secret, top secret is how you surrender yourself to me and continue to live your life. That is the ultimate thing. Therefore, he's saying, now it's up to you. Brimushya means now do vichara, do your alosana. Apna bimars kijiye. Etad aseshena, but without keeping any questions still with you. Remove all your doubts. If you have any questions, ask now. Aseshena, by removing all your doubts, yatha ichhasi, the way you decide, whichever way you want to do, you do. Tatha Guru, you can do that. In any which way you want to move, you can move. But one condition, please think about the whole story that I told you. And don't take up any advice in isolation from others. Look at them holistically, and you would understand what is correct for you. Because there is some advice on, that jnana is the ultimate thing. There's somewhere sarva karma sannyasa is the ultimate thing. Somewhere it says karma is the ultimate thing. So you might get confused. So first do particular analysis, and you figure out which of these advices are actually meant for you. Where do you stand? Because it's meant for a range of students. So a professor comes into the class and there are different kinds of students in the class. So he makes a general preparation. But then it's up to the students to go back and then meditate over everything. And depends on who is preparing for what sort of entrance examination, what they want to do. Accordingly, they'll pay attention. Everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. That's what the great Acharya here, Lord himself, is saying. Do this analysis and then you figure out where do we fit and accordingly take your decision. Move forward in life. Iti anena prakarena, and thus in this manner, te tubhyam, to you, I have mentioned, atyanta priyaya, you're very dear to me, I love you. Jnana atma matra vishayam, what have I told you? All about the self. I mentioned about karma and shraddha and all that. Ultimately, for what? So that you have the key to open your self-understanding. Moksha sadhanam and atma vishaya jnanam. If you know about cricket, you know about architecture, you know about anything else. That's not moksha dayaka. But knowing about the self, that is what will lead us to liberation or self-awareness. So he's saying that is moksha sadhana, which is atma vishaya jnanam, guhyat guhyataram. This is the top secret among all secrets. Parama rahasyad api. So if there is any secret, it is even more secret than that. Most mysterious, most difficult to understand and fathom. Sannyasantat karma yogat rahasyataram. So both sarvakarma sannyasa and a karma yoga. But this is even top secret because here Bhagavan is saying, how can you become a nitya sannyasi? You surrender yourself to me. That is the top thing. That is the nuclear power, nuclear weapon. That is the nuclear option is given. That you exercise it. Then other things follow. Tat phala bhuta tvad akhyatam samantat kathitam. So I have told this to you comprehensively at great lengths. Maya sarvagyena parama aptena. Apta is somebody who is wise, who knows this thing. He's not cheating you. He's not a hypocrite. So parama apta is what? God himself. And why is parama apta? He knows everything. Why is he knowing everything? Because he has created everything. Without knowing everything, he cannot create everything. So, in the Brahma Sutra, these parts are discussed by Sankaracharya. Ataha bimrishya, by doing your vichara, paryalochya etat, then whatever I mentioned. Maya upadishtam, whatever is given to you as my upadesha, my advice. Gita sastram ashishena. And this Gita Sastra, you have a deeper contemplation over it. Samasthena, when you look at all the aspects, don't take up an isolated statement and then get confused about it. Sarveka Vakyataya. So there is what is Eka Vakyata in Mimamsa, Ekartha Pratipadakatvam. So there are separate states. There are a lot of, as per grammar, it's a subject, there's a predicate in Sanskrit grammar, and there is a Tinganta. Wherever there is a word, that becomes a Vakya. He's saying, no, that's not the purpose. You look at the whole text, and there is a Ekartha Pratipadakata. What is that secret? What is that holistic thing? You take that into consideration, then only you will understand it. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of mutually contradictory statements given in Bhagavad Gita. A lot of people get confused. They would be happier if they hadn't read Bhagavad Gita, because if somebody doesn't meditate on it, get confused. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita, so far I know, nobody has read it once and he has benefited from it. It's a lifetime thing. So one has to read it again and again. And each verse throws up new understanding. And when we personalize it, we relate to it, then we understand it better. Every day you learn a little if you read it. Okay, Gyatva. And then when you know that, Sarveka Vakyataya Gyatva, when you know this in a holistic manner, Swa Adhikara Anurupyena, then you understand what's your Adhikara. What is your perfection level? Where you can start doing your next phase of sadhana. Yatha Ichchasi, whatever you decide, Tatha Kuru, you're free to do it. But please go through the text and then understand it fully. Remember what have I said, then come to a conclusion. Natu etad abrimishya eva, but not without analyzing, without reflecting, without contemplating about all this. Kama karena, because you have desire. There's a push in you. You go back to your prakriti, it will push you somewhere. No, not because of any kind of motivation you have. You first free yourself from all motivation, all emotional entrapments. Sit with this text and meditate on it. Yat kinchit ityarthaha. So don't do it because if you have some emotional affinities to do X, Y, Z, and then that works as a confirmation bias that forces you to misunderstand whatever you read because you do not recognize the devil sitting in your mind, which is born out of your past sanskaras and karmas. So first we have to sort of, vaccinate our consciousness, sterilize it, purify it. Then once we have become free from the past impressions and our prejudices, we are able to open up our consciousness, and we can understand it much better. Then he's giving a little of commentary which again deviates a little from Sankaracharya. He'll become these sannyasa adhikara, which we have discussed earlier, but let's go through whatever is mentioned here. Atra, so etavad uktam, now I have explained all this. Asuddha antakaranasya, the person who doesn't have antakarana suddhi, his mind is not transparent, not good. Mumukhyur moksha sadhana, jnanutpati yogyata, pratibandhaka, papakhyartha. So, but he needs mukhya. He has Asuddhantakarana. He doesn't have enough money. He has a lot of problems. But he wants to live in a five-star hotel, in a palatial building. He wants that. What he has to do? Moksha he directly wants. Then, if he's a mumukshu, nevertheless, moksha sadhana. And how does he get moksha? He has to have atma-jnana. And how can he have jnana-utpatti? Yogyata, he has to have the eligibility. And how does he get that yogyata? He has to remove pratibandhaka. And what is pratibandhaka? Purva papa. And how to do? So then, how do you remove purva papa? Then, phalavisandhi parityagena. Bhagavan says, yeah, purva papa can be nullified. You start doing niskama karma, surrender to me. Phalavisandhi parityagena. Don't add to your papa, your karmas, by doing things with goals and intentions, but surrender yourself to me. Bhagavad Arpana Buddhya, Varnasrama Dharmanushthanan. Now, this is the sociological thing coming in, as I was saying, which is a little complicated in today's setting. So, in that historical thing he was mentioning, but basically, depending on wherever you are in your life, whatever is your social station, whatever you're doing, Bhagavad Arpana Buddhya, you are in financial sector, or maybe in architecture, maybe in banking or in technology, wherever you are, maybe teaching, maybe in health, wherever you are, do it. Ishwara Arpana Vidya. Tata Suddhanta Karanasya, then your mind gets purified. And then Bibidisa Utpattau, then you have Jnana Agraha. You want to do Bibidisa Sannyasa, Jnantum Ichha Bibidisa. Gurum Upasritya, then you go to Vedanta Acharya. Jnana sadhana Vedanta Vakya Vicharaya. Then you want to do meditation on the Vedanta Vakyas, you start studying that. Brahmanasya Sarvakarma Sannyasaha. Then the Brahmins is that historical setting. They had adhikara because they can take suffering and endurance. So he will take Sarvakarma Sannyasaha. What about others? Or now that Brahmin thing we remove in our setting, somebody is willing because he is born with a bit of pure antakarana, so he readily moves and takes sannyas. The other one, because of whatever problem or difficulty, maybe family issues, maybe he is a great teacher and there's a demand that he continues to teach or remains a doctor, or he's a great fighter, he's a great sports person. Can't ditch the nation is demanding it. He has to give the service. Then what should he do? Then he's saying, Tataha Bhagavad Eka Saranataya. So once he takes this Sarvakarma Sannyasi Saranataya, Vivikta Desa Sevadi, Vivikta Desa Sevitam, he'll sit in isolation to meditation. Jnana Sadhana Bhyasat, then he will do Sravana Manana Nidhyasana. Sravana Manana Nidhyasana Sanehi Atma Sakhyat Karo Utpatya Moksheti. So he'll go study Vedanta, sit in isolation, meditate on it, and then there is Sakshatkara, Atma Sakshatkara, then he gets Moksha. Whatever others, as I mentioned, who are because of some constraints cannot take sannyasa, historically they were denied the chance. Kshatriya, these two, whatever they're professionals and army and soldiers and whosoever they are, sannyasa anadhikarinaha. So they are not fit for taking sannyasa or they don't find it appropriate. Mumukhyo antakarna suddhim. Suddhi anantaramapi is the mind is already clear, but they have a family to look after, or the country wants them to serve. Where do they go? They're pure. Bhagavat Agya Palanaya. Then he takes God's advice. And what does he do? Loka Sangrahaya. He wants to solve the society. Cha Yatha Katham Chit Karmani. Whatever he's doing, he can continue to do. Kurvato api. Even if he does that. Bhagavat Eka Saranataya. But he's completely surrendered to the Lord. Purvajanmakrita sannyasadi paripakadva. Or he had taken sannyasa, he had done some sadhana in the previous life that matures now in this life. Hiranyagarbha nyayena. Like Hiranyagarbha. When this kalpa comes to an end, he gets liberated. Hiranyagarbha nyayena tad anapekshyanadva. And therefore he doesn't require this, that he has to be sannyasa earlier in earlier life. Bhagavad anugraha matrena. He eva. Then through this Bhagavat Anugraha, what he is able to do? Tattva Jnana Utpatya, then this self-realization happens, Tattva Darshan happens. Agrima Dharmani, maybe in the next life, if not in this life. Then he is sort of born in a ascetic family, or maybe he is born in a family without social responsibilities. Brahmana Janmam Labhena. That's his sociological aspect. He's bringing in his historical setting. But here we can interpret that he will be reborn maybe in a very spiritual setting without any social challenges, without any economic challenges. So he can readily get into it. Sannyasadi Purva Jnana Utpatya, then he is able to renounce and meditate on it. Ma Mukhya iti. Evam Vicharite cha Nasti Mohavakasa iti bhavaha. So once you understand what I have advised to you like this, there is no room for any confusion. So we'll keep it here and we'll take it forward tomorrow. So I'll put an end to the YouTube and then we'll do this Antima class. If you have any questions, you can ask.